My name is Madison Foster, and I need to tell you about the biggest mistake I almost made as a mother. It's the kind of story that keeps me awake at night sometimes, even though it happened 3 years ago. I'm 32 now, and I thought I had this whole parenting thing figured out. I mean, I had 3 kids who seemed to be thriving, or so I thought. We live in Maplewood, Ohio, in one of those neighborhoods where every house looks like it belongs on a Christmas card. White picket fences, manicured lawns, and that perfect suburban calm that makes you feel like you're living the American dream. My husband David works in finance, and I had been managing our household while working part-time as a graphic designer from home. On paper, everything looked perfect. Our oldest, Tyler, was 15 and the star of his high school basketball team, tall, confident, and charismatic. Everything you'd want in a teenage son. Then there was Chloe, 13, who seemed to excel at everything she touched. Honor roll student, soccer captain, and already talking about which colleges she wanted to apply to. They were my success stories, the kids I could brag about at PTA meetings and neighborhood barbecues. And then there was Lily. Lily was 7 when this story really begins, though I realize now that the signs had been there for much longer. She was our surprise baby, born 8 years after Chloe, when we thought our family was complete. Don't get me wrong, we loved her dearly. But by the time she came along, our family dynamics were already set. Tyler and Chloe had their routines, their achievements, their constant stream of activities and accomplishments that demanded our attention. Lily was quiet. She was the kind of child who could entertain herself for hours with a few crayons and some paper. While her siblings filled every room with their energy and demands, Lily seemed content to exist in the spaces between their chaos. I told myself this was a good thing, an easy child, a blessing, really. I should have paid more attention to that quietness. Our dinner table was always loud and full of energy. Tyler would regale us with stories from practice or complain about his teachers. Chloe would update us on her latest project or drama with her friends. David would share stories from work, and I'd add my own commentary about neighborhood happenings or client projects. The conversation flowed easily between the 4 of us, bouncing from topic to topic with the comfortable rhythm of a family who had been sharing meals together for years. Lily would sit there, in her booster seat at the end of the table, cutting her food into tiny pieces and eating quietly. Sometimes she'd try to add something to the conversation, a story from school, something she'd seen in the backyard, a question about something she didn't understand. But her small voice often got lost in the noise, interrupted by Tyler's latest joke or Chloe's urgent need to discuss her upcoming science fair project. "Just a minute, honey," I'd say, not really looking at her as I helped Chloe with something, or listened to Tyler's story. We'll talk about that later. But later never seemed to come. By the time the dishes were cleared and homework was done and practices were attended and projects were helped with, Lily was already tucked into bed, often having fallen asleep with a book in her lap. I convinced myself this was normal. The baby of the family learning to go with the flow. She seemed happy enough, I reasoned. She never cried or complained. She did well in school, had a few friends, and her teachers always said she was a delight to have in class. What more could you ask for? It was a Tuesday evening in early October, when I first noticed something was different. The leaves on our big oak tree in the backyard had just started to turn, painting our yard in shades of gold and amber. I was cleaning up after dinner, stacking plates in the dishwasher while Tyler and Chloe argued about whose turn it was to take out the trash, when I realized I hadn't seen Lily since we'd finished eating. "Where's Lily?" I called out, expecting to hear her voice from the living room where she usually went to color or read after dinner. "I think she went outside," Chloe said, not looking up from her math homework spread across the kitchen counter. "Outside." That was unusual. Lily wasn't much of an outdoor kid, especially not in the evening when it was getting dark earlier each day. I walked to the sliding glass door that led to our deck and peered out into the backyard. There she was, sitting cross-legged under the oak tree at the far end of our yard. She had a small plate balanced on her lap and was eating what looked like the dinner she'd barely touched at the table. The sight struck me as odd, but not alarming. Kids are weird, I told myself. Maybe she wanted some fresh air. I watched her for a few minutes through the glass. She ate slowly, methodically, occasionally looking up at the sky through the branches above her. There was something peaceful about the scene, almost picturesque, my little girl having a quiet moment in nature. When she came back inside 20 minutes later, I asked her about it. Did you enjoy eating outside, sweetheart?" She nodded, but didn't elaborate. Lily had always been a child of few words, so I didn't push. The next evening, the same thing happened. Lily picked at her dinner while the rest of us talked and laughed around the table, then quietly slipped outside with her half-eaten plate. This time I noticed that she'd taken a small cup of juice with her too. "She's probably just going through a phase," David said when I mentioned it to him later that night as we got ready for bed. Remember when Tyler insisted on eating breakfast in his Batman costume for 6 months? Kids do weird things. But this felt different somehow. Tyler's Batman phase had been about excitement, about wanting attention and playing pretend. This felt more like retreat. By Friday of that week, Lily's outdoor dinners had become routine. She'd sit with us for maybe 10 minutes, eating a few bites and listening to the conversation swirl around her. Then, without a word, she'd slip from her chair and head outside with her plate. The first time I suggested she stay and finish eating with the family, she looked at me with those big brown eyes and said, "It's too loud in here, Mama. I can think better outside." Too loud. The words stuck with me, though I tried to dismiss them. We weren't that loud, were we? We were just a normal, active family. Dinner conversation was supposed to be lively, but as I started paying more attention, I began to notice things I'd somehow missed before. How Lily would open her mouth to speak, then close it again when Tyler launched into another story. How she'd flinch slightly when Chloe got excited and her voice rose to near shouting levels. How she'd push her food around her plate, looking like she was waiting for something. Maybe a pause in the conversation, a moment when someone might ask her about her day. That pause never came. We were all too busy talking to notice the one person who was trying to listen. I started watching her more closely during those outdoor dinners. She'd arrange herself carefully under the tree, sometimes leaning against the trunk, sometimes sitting in the grass. She'd eat each bite thoughtfully, like she was actually tasting her food for the first time all day. Sometimes she'd talk to herself, not crazy talking, just the quiet murmurs of a child processing her thoughts out loud. "The clouds look like elephants today," I heard her say one evening when I cracked the door open to check on her. "Mrs. Peterson said my handwriting is getting better," she told the tree another night. "I wish Mittens would come visit again," she sighed, referring to our neighbor's cat who had died the previous month. These were the things she wanted to share, I realized. These were the stories she'd been trying to tell at our dinner table, the thoughts that got lost in the noise of our family's daily chaos. One particularly chilly evening in late October, I watched her through the kitchen window as she sat under the tree wrapped in her little pink jacket, eating soup from a bowl I'd warmed up for her. The temperature had dropped into the 40s, and I could see her breath in small puffs as she ate. This was getting ridiculous. She was going to catch pneumonia. I slid open the door and called out to her, "Lily, honey, it's too cold to eat outside tonight. Come back in. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I thought she might argue. Instead, she just nodded and started to gather her things. But as she walked back toward the house, I heard her say something under her breath that made my chest tighten. I guess I wasn't really hungry anyway. She handed me her bowl, still half full of soup, and headed straight to her room without another word. That night, as I lay in bed listening to David's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. My daughter was choosing to eat alone in the cold rather than sit with her family. She was telling her stories to a tree instead of to us. And somehow, without meaning to, we had created a home where a 7-year-old girl felt like she didn't belong at her own dinner table. I just didn't know yet how deep the damage went, or how much harder it was going to get before it got better. The next few weeks passed in a blur of Halloween preparations and the usual chaos of managing 3 kids, schedules. I kept telling myself I was overthinking the situation with Lily. Maybe David was right. Maybe it was just a phase. Kids went through phases all the time, didn't they? But the outdoor dinners continued, even as November brought colder temperatures and earlier sunsets. I started making excuses to myself and others. When my neighbor, Carol, mentioned seeing Lily eating alone in the backyard, I laughed it off. "Oh, you know how kids are," I said, forcing a smile as we stood in our driveways getting our mail. "She's going through this independent streak." "Wants to eat her dinner while watching the birds." Carol nodded politely, but I caught the concerned look in her eyes. The same look I'd been avoiding in my own mirror. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in mid-November. It had been raining on and off all day, and the temperature had dropped to barely above freezing. Surely, I thought, this would be the night Lily stayed inside for dinner. We gathered around the table as usual. Tyler was excited about making varsity basketball as a sophomore, and the conversation quickly centered around his achievement. Chloe chimed in with her own news about being selected for the state science fair. David and I beamed with pride, asking question after question about their accomplishments. Lily sat quietly at her usual spot, poking at her meatloaf and mashed potatoes. I noticed she'd barely eaten anything, but I was caught up in Tyler's animated retelling of his coach's reaction to his performance in practice. And then Coach Martinez said, Tyler was saying when I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Lily was sliding down from her chair, plate in hand. "Lily, sweetie, where are you going?" I asked, though my attention was still partially on Tyler's story. "Outside," she said simply. "Honey, it's raining." You can't eat outside tonight." She paused by the sliding door, looking out at the wet deck and the oak tree barely visible in the early darkness. For a moment, I thought common sense would prevail. Instead, she opened the door. "Lily, no," I called out, but she was already stepping onto the covered part of our deck. I excused myself from the table and followed her outside. The air was sharp and damp, and I could see her breath in small clouds as she settled into a plastic patio chair under the overhang. "Lily, this is ridiculous. Come back inside right now." She looked up at me with those big brown eyes, and I saw something there that made my heart skip. It wasn't defiance or stubbornness. It was resignation. "I'm okay here, Mama," she said quietly, cutting a small piece of meatloaf. "I can still see the tree. You'll catch your death of cold out here. Your food will get cold too." "It's already cold," she said, and I wasn't sure if she meant the food or something else entirely. I stood there for a moment, torn between dragging her inside and trying to understand why my 7-year-old was so determined to eat alone in the cold. From inside, I could hear Tyler's voice rising with excitement as he continued his story, punctuated by David's laughter and Chloe's interjections. "Lily, what's wrong? Why don't you want to eat with the family?" She chewed thoughtfully before answering. "Nobody listens in there." The simplicity of her words hit me like a physical blow. Nobody listens. How could that be true? We were a family. Of course we listened to each other. But even as I formed the protest in my mind, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd asked Lily about her day. Really asked, with my full attention, the way I did with Tyler and Chloe. "I listened to you, sweetheart." Lily's small smile was sadder than any tears would have been. "You're busy, Mama. Tyler has games and Chloe has projects and Daddy has work things. It's okay." "It's okay." Those 2 words shattered something inside me. My 7-year-old had learned to accept that she didn't matter enough for her family's attention. She'd learned to be okay with being invisible. I sat down in the chair next to her, not caring about the cold or the dampness seeping through my jeans. "Tell me about your day," I said. She looked at me suspiciously, as if this might be a trick. "You want to hear about my day?" "Yes." Every detail. And so, sitting on our back deck in the November cold, my daughter told me about her day. She told me about how her friend Emma had shared her cookies at lunch, and how their teacher had read them a story about a rabbit who felt invisible. She told me about the art project she'd been working on, a family portrait where she'd drawn herself very small in the corner. I made myself little because I didn't want to take up too much room," she explained matter-of-factly. As she talked, I watched her face come alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her eyes brightened, her voice gained confidence, and she gestured with her fork as she described the rabbit in the story. "The rabbit felt invisible too," she said. "But then the other animals realized they missed him when he was gone. The parallel wasn't lost on me." My daughter was telling me, in the way that children do, that she felt invisible in her own family. When she finished talking, we sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. I could hear the muffled sounds of dinner conversation continuing inside, Tyler and Chloe's voices mixing with David's deeper tones. "Lily," I said carefully, "why do you like eating out here better than inside?" She considered the question seriously. "It's quieter. I can hear myself think." "And I can pretend the tree is listening to me." "What do you talk to the tree about?" "Everything. My day at school, my drawings, my dreams. Sometimes I tell it stories." She paused, then added quietly, "I told it about how I felt sad when Mittens died, and how nobody seemed to notice that I was sad. I remembered when our neighbor's cat had died." Tyler and Chloe had expressed brief sympathy before moving on to other topics. David and I had been dealing with work stress and school events. None of us had noticed that Lily had formed a special bond with that cat, or that she was grieving its loss. "I noticed," I lied, then immediately felt guilty for the dishonesty. Lily's gentle smile told me she knew I was lying, but she was kind enough not to call me out on it. "It's okay, Mama." The tree is a good listener. That night, after Lily was in bed, I sat David down and tried to explain what I was beginning to understand. We were losing our daughter, not to rebellion or defiance, but to neglect disguised as benign family dynamics. "She's just quiet," David said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Some kids are naturally introverted. David, she's eating dinner alone in the cold rather than sit with us. That's not introversion." That's giving up." I told him about our conversation on the deck, about the rabbit story, about the family portrait where she'd drawn herself tiny in the corner. "Maybe we should talk to someone," I suggested. "A counselor or—" "A counselor." David's voice rose slightly. "Madison, don't you think you're being a little dramatic? She's 7. Kids are resilient." But I'd seen the resignation in my daughter's eyes. I'd heard the acceptance in her voice when she said, "It's okay about being overlooked." That wasn't resilience. That was a child learning that her needs didn't matter. The next evening, I made a decision. I was going to eat dinner outside with Lily. "What are you doing?" Tyler asked as I prepared 2 plates and headed for the door. Having dinner with your sister. Outside? It's like 30 degrees. Then maybe you should think about why she prefers it out there. Tyler looked genuinely confused, as if the idea that Lily had preferences or feelings that might differ from his own had never occurred to him. I found Lily already settled in her usual spot on the deck, wrapped in her pink jacket, and eating quietly. Mind if I join you? I asked. She looked up, surprised. But you want to eat out here too? I want to eat wherever you are. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds, the last birds of the day, the distant hum of traffic, the rustle of the mostly bare oak tree in the gentle wind. Mama, Lily said eventually, do you think the tree gets lonely? I looked up at the old oak, its branches reaching into the darkening sky. I don't know, sweetheart. Why do you ask? Because it stands there all by itself, and nobody really pays attention to it until it's really pretty in the fall or really bare in the winter. But it's there all the time. Being a tree. My throat tightened. She wasn't really talking about the tree. I think, I said carefully, that the tree is probably very grateful when someone like you comes to sit with it and really sees it. Lily smiled. The first real, genuine smile I'd seen from her in weeks. From inside the house, I could hear the usual dinner sounds, Tyler and Chloe's voices, David's occasional interjections, the clink of silverware against plates. Our family, continuing their routine without us. And for the first time, I realized how it must sound to Lily. Not like family conversation, but like noise. Not like connection, but like exclusion. Lily, I said, I'm sorry. She looked at me curiously. For what? For not listening. For not seeing you. For letting you disappear while I was right there looking at you. She reached over with her small hand and patted mine. It's okay, Mama. You see me now. But was it enough? Could I undo months of unintentional neglect with a few outdoor dinners and heartfelt apologies? And more importantly, how had I let it get this far without noticing? As we finished eating and headed back inside, I caught sight of our reflection in the sliding glass door. 2 figures in winter coats, sharing a meal in the cold because it felt warmer than the perfectly heated house behind us. That's when I knew things had to change. Not just for Lily, but for all of us. Because a family where one member feels invisible isn't really a family at all. The conversation I needed to have with Tyler and Chloe was one I'd been dreading for days. How do you tell your teenage children that their enthusiasm and achievements, things you'd always celebrated, had somehow become part of the problem. I decided to approach them separately, starting with Chloe. At 13, she was old enough to understand emotional nuance, but young enough that her habits weren't completely set in stone. I found her in her room on a Saturday afternoon, sprawled across her bed with homework scattered around her like confetti. Her laptop was open to a research document, and she was highlighting passages in a textbook with the focused intensity she brought to everything she did. "Chloe, can we talk for a minute?" She looked up, immediately alert. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart, nothing like that. I wanted to talk to you about Lily." I sat on the edge of her bed, moving aside a stack of index cards covered in her neat handwriting. "Have you noticed anything different about your sister lately?" Chloe's brow furrowed in concentration. "Different how? She's always been quiet." "I mean, have you noticed that she's been eating her dinners outside, even when it's cold?" "Oh, that." Chloe shrugged. Yeah. I figured she was going through some weird phase, like when I insisted on wearing only purple for 3 months in 4th grade. But this wasn't about purple clothes or temporary preferences, and I struggled to find the right words to explain it. "Chloe, I think Lily feels left out during our family dinners, like we don't really hear her when she tries to talk." Chloe's expression shifted from casual dismissal to something more thoughtful. But she never really says anything important, just little kid stuff about school and her drawings. To her, those things are important. I watched as Chloe processed this. She was a bright kid, and I could see her mentally reviewing recent dinner conversations, perhaps seeing them from a different perspective for the first time. "I don't mean to ignore her," she said slowly. "It's just..." "Tyler and I have so much going on, and when we're all together, it feels like the only time to really talk about stuff." "I know. And I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong, but I think we need to make some changes as a family." Chloe nodded, though I could see uncertainty in her eyes. "What kind of changes?" "Maybe we could try asking Lily about her day first sometimes." "Or giving her a chance to finish talking before we jump in with our own stories." "Okay," Chloe said, though she sounded a bit hesitant. "I can try that." The conversation with Tyler was more challenging. I found him in the garage, shooting baskets at the hoop David had installed years ago. The rhythmic bounce of the ball against the backboard provided a steady backdrop to our conversation. "Tyler, I need to talk to you about something. He caught the ball and turned to face me, sweat beading on his forehead despite the November chill. If this is about my history grade, I already talked to Mr. Peterson about extra credit. It's not about grades. It's about Lily. Tyler's expression immediately shifted to one of mild annoyance. The look he got whenever he felt like he was being asked to deal with little kid problems. What about her? I explained about the outdoor dinners, about Lily feeling unheard, about the need for our family to be more inclusive in our conversations. Tyler listened, bouncing the basketball absently as I talked. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Look, Mom, I get that you're worried about her, but she's 7. 7-year-olds are weird, and it's not like we're mean to her or anything. We have more interesting stuff to talk about. More interesting to who? To everyone. Tyler's voice rose slightly. Come on, Mom. You really want me to pretend to be excited about her finger paintings when I'm trying to tell you about making varsity? His words stung because they contained an uncomfortable grain of truth. Tyler's achievements were objectively more significant than Lily's daily activities. But significance to whom? Tyler, your sister looks up to you. When you dismiss what she cares about, it teaches her that her interests don't matter. I don't dismiss her. We live in different worlds, you know? She's a little kid. I'm almost in high school. I could see this wasn't going to be a quick fix. Tyler wasn't being malicious. He genuinely didn't understand how his behavior affected his little sister. To him, the family dinner dynamics felt natural and appropriate. I'm just asking you to try to include her sometimes. Ask her about her day. Listen when she talks. Make her feel like she belongs at the table, too. Tyler nodded, but I could tell he was just agreeing to end the conversation. Real change was going to take time and consistent effort. That evening, I decided to try something different. Instead of our usual free-for-all dinner conversation, I instituted a new rule. Everyone would get a chance to share something about their day, starting with Lily. The results were mixed. Lily, why don't you tell us about your day first? I said as we settled around the table. Lily looked surprised, then suspicious, as if this might be some kind of trap. She glanced around the table at her siblings and father, all of whom were looking at her expectantly. She started, her voice barely above a whisper. We had art class today. That's nice, sweetheart. What did you make? A picture of our family. She poked at her green beans. Mrs. William said it was very good. I'd love to see it, I said. What did you draw? Lily's face brightened slightly. I drew all of us in our backyard. Daddy was reading the newspaper in his chair, and Tyler was shooting baskets, and Chloe was doing homework on the picnic table, and you were gardening. What were you doing in the picture? David asked, and I was grateful that he was trying to engage. I was sitting under the oak tree, Lily said matter-of-factly. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken understanding. Even in her artwork, Lily had placed herself apart from the family, alone under her tree. That sounds like a beautiful picture, I said, my voice slightly strained. I can't wait to see it. Tyler shifted impatiently in his chair. I could tell he was dying to share his news about basketball practice, but he was trying to follow my new rule about letting everyone have a turn. Anything else about your day, Lily? She shook her head, already retreating back into herself. Okay, Tyler. What about you? Tyler launched into his usual animated recap of practice, his voice filling the dining room with energy and excitement. Chloe chimed in with questions and comments, and soon the conversation had returned to its familiar rhythm. I watched Lily during this exchange. She listened politely, even smiled at some of Tyler's funnier stories, but I could see her slowly checking out. By the time Tyler finished talking and Chloe started sharing her news about the science fair, Lily was back to pushing food around her plate. When Chloe finished her update, I turned to Lily again. Anything else you want to share, sweetheart? She looked up, surprised to be included again. For a moment, I thought she might actually say something. Then she shook her head. I'm full, she said quietly. May I be excused? I looked at her plate. She'd eaten maybe 3 bites. You've barely touched your dinner. I'm not very hungry. And there it was again, that resigned acceptance that had become her default response to everything. She wasn't hungry, because meals had become something to endure rather than enjoy. Lily, wait, I said, as she started to slide down from her chair. Do you want to eat outside tonight? She nodded. Would you like some company? She considered this, then nodded again. As I prepared a fresh, warm plate for Lily and wrapped my own barely touched dinner to take outside, I caught David's eye. He looked confused and a little hurt. Madison, what are we doing here? Are we really going to start eating outside every night? If that's what it takes. Takes for what? For our daughter to feel like she matters in this family. Tyler and Chloe were watching this exchange with growing alarm. I could see them beginning to understand that this wasn't just about dinner locations. This was about something much more fundamental in how our family functioned. Outside, the November air was crisp and clear. Lily and I settled into our chairs on the deck, and for a few minutes, we ate in comfortable silence. "Mama," Lily said eventually, "you don't have to eat out here if you don't want to. I want to be wherever you are. But it's cold, and you were enjoying Tyler's story." I set down my fork and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. In the soft light from the kitchen window, I could see the careful consideration in her eyes, the way she was trying to take care of my feelings even while protecting her own. "Lily, Tyler's story will be there tomorrow. There will always be another practice, another game, another achievement to celebrate. But there's only one you, and only one today that you had, and I want to hear about it. You already heard about my day?" "I told you about art class. Tell me more. Tell me about lunch, about recess, about the friends you played with. Tell me what made you happy today, and what made you sad." And slowly, carefully, like a flower opening to the sun, Lily began to talk. She told me about how her friend Emma had been absent, and how that made lunchtime lonely. She told me about the book she was reading in library time, about the butterfly she'd seen on the playground even though it was almost winter. She told me about feeling proud when she helped a kindergartner tie his shoes, and about feeling frustrated when she couldn't reach the monkey bars. These weren't earth-shattering revelations. They were the small daily experiences that make up a 7-year-old's world, but they mattered to her, and therefore they mattered to me. As she talked, I realized how much I'd been missing. Not just the events of her days, but the person she was becoming. Her empathy, her observations, her unique way of seeing the world. All of it had been happening right in front of me while I was focused on Tyler's athletic achievements and Chloe's academic success. "Lily," I said when she finished talking, "thank you for sharing all of that with me." "You're welcome, Mama." She paused, then added quietly, "It feels good to tell someone." That night, after Lily was tucked into bed, David and I had our most serious conversation yet about what was happening with our family. "I think you're right," he said, and I could hear the reluctance in his voice. "Something needs to change. It's not going to be easy." Tyler and Chloe are used to being the center of attention. They're not going to understand why they suddenly have to share the spotlight with their little sister. And maybe that's part of the problem, David said thoughtfully. Maybe we've made everything about achievement and accomplishment, when it should be about just being a family. I reached for his hand across the space between us on the couch. "I'm scared, David." I'm scared that we've already damaged something that can't be fixed. She's 7, Madison. Kids are resilient, remember. But I wasn't thinking about resilience anymore. I was thinking about trust, about connection, about the invisible threads that bind families together. How many of those threads had we allowed to break without noticing? The next morning, I found Lily's family portrait from art class tucked into her backpack. She'd drawn it exactly as she described. All of us scattered around the backyard, engaged in our separate activities, and there, in the corner under the oak tree, was a tiny figure with brown hair and a pink dress. She'd made herself so small that she barely took up any space on the paper at all. I stared at that drawing for a long time, this visual representation of how my daughter saw her place in our family. Small, separate, easily overlooked. But it wasn't too late. It couldn't be too late. That evening, I made another decision. Instead of trying to force Lily back to the indoor dinner table, I was going to bring the family to her. "We're eating dinner outside tonight," I announced the next evening as the family gathered in the kitchen. Tyler looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Mom, it's like 25 degrees out there. Then we'll bundle up." Lily's been eating outside for weeks, and if it's good enough for her, it's good enough for all of us. Chloe shifted uncomfortably. "But why can't we just convince Lily to eat inside? Wouldn't that be easier?" "Because," I said, pulling out our heaviest winter coats from the closet, "Lily has been trying to tell us something, and instead of listening, we've been trying to change her. Tonight, we change." David appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion. "Madison, are you sure about this? It's pretty cold out there." "I'm positive. We're going to sit under Lily's tree and have dinner as a family, all of us." The resistance was immediate and vocal. Tyler complained about having to wear his winter coat to eat. Chloe worried about her homework getting blown around by the wind. David pointed out that we didn't have enough outdoor furniture for everyone, but I was determined. I dragged kitchen chairs onto the deck, wrapped everyone's food in foil to keep it warm, and set up what was probably the most unconventional family dinner we'd ever had. Lily watched all of this preparation with wide eyes, not quite believing that her entire family was actually going to join her in her special place. "Are you sure you want to eat out here, Mama?" she asked for the third time as I arranged blankets on the chairs. "I'm positive, sweetheart." "This is where you like to eat, so this is where we're going to eat." As we settled around our makeshift outdoor table, the complaints continued. Tyler grumbled about his food getting cold. Chloe kept adjusting her blanket and worrying about catching pneumonia. David looked resigned, but determined to see this through. But something magical happened as we sat there in the crisp November air, bundled up like Arctic explorers, trying to eat meatloaf with gloved hands. We started laughing. It began with Tyler trying to drink his milk while wearing mittens and ending up with milk dripping down his chin. Chloe giggled at the sight, which made Tyler laugh, which made David chuckle, which made me smile. And Lily was beaming. "This is how I eat every night," she said proudly, demonstrating the proper technique for managing a fork while wearing winter gloves. "How do you do it?" Chloe asked, genuinely curious. "It's so hard to hold anything. You get used to it," Lily said matter-of-factly. "And the food tastes better out here anyway." "Better how?" David asked. Lily considered this seriously. "I don't know. Maybe because you can taste the air too, and because it's quiet enough to actually taste your food instead of just eating it." As ridiculous as it sounded, I knew what she meant. Sitting outside, away from the noise and distractions of the house, I found myself actually paying attention to what I was eating. The flavors seemed more distinct, more intentional. "Tell us about your day, Lily," I said. And this time the invitation felt natural rather than forced. Lily launched into a detailed account of her day, and something remarkable happened. Without the familiar setting of our dining room table, without the usual rush to finish dinner and move on to homework and activities, Tyler and Chloe actually listened. They asked questions. They laughed at her stories. They seemed genuinely interested in her 7-year-old perspective on the world. "Wait," Tyler said, interrupting Lily's story about recess. "You're telling me that Jason Morrison pushed Emma off the swings?" Lily nodded solemnly. "He said girls aren't supposed to swing so high." "That's ridiculous," Chloe chimed in. "Did you tell a teacher?" "I helped Emma up and told Jason that swings are for everyone. Then Emma and I played hopscotch instead." Tyler grinned. "Good for you, Lily. Standing up to bullies is important, even when they're bigger than you." I watched this exchange with amazement. Tyler, who usually had no patience for little kid problems, was engaging with Lily's story as if it mattered. Because in this moment, it did matter. As the evening wore on, something shifted in our family dynamic. Maybe it was the novelty of eating outside, or maybe it was the fact that we were all equally uncomfortable and therefore equally vulnerable. Whatever it was, the usual hierarchy of our dinner conversations disappeared. Tyler told us about basketball practice, but he also asked Lily about her art project. Chloe shared her excitement about the science fair, but she also listened when Lily told us about the book she was reading. David talked about work, but he also asked everyone, including Lily, what they wanted to do over the upcoming weekend. "Can we eat outside again tomorrow?" Lily asked, as we gathered up our plates and blankets. "It's going to be even colder tomorrow," David warned. "I don't mind," Lily said quickly. "I like eating with everyone." Tyler surprised me by speaking up. "Actually, it was kind of fun. Like camping, but in our own backyard." Chloe nodded in agreement. "And Lily's right about the food tasting better. I don't know why, but it does." We ended up eating outside for the rest of the week. Each night, we bundled up in layers and gathered around our makeshift table under the oak tree. Each night, Lily glowed with happiness at having her whole family in her special place. But more importantly, each night we learned how to really listen to each other. On Friday, something beautiful happened. As we were finishing dessert, hot chocolate that steamed in the cold air, Lily looked around at all of us and said, "Thank you for coming to my tree. Thank you for sharing it with us," David replied. Lily smiled, then stood up and walked over to the oak tree. She placed her small hand on its trunk and looked up into its bare branches. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" I asked. "Telling the tree thank you too. I used to be the only one who listened to it, but now it has a whole family." Tyler rolled his eyes, but it was good-natured rather than dismissive. "Lily, trees can't hear us." "How do you know?" Lily asked seriously. "Just because they can't talk back doesn't mean they can't listen. And you know what? Tyler didn't have an answer for that. As November turned into December, we gradually moved our dinners back inside as the weather became too harsh for outdoor eating. But something fundamental had changed in our family. We started what I called Lily time at every meal. 5 minutes at the beginning of dinner, where Lily got to share whatever was on her mind without interruption. Tyler and Chloe learned to wait their turn, and David and I learned to really listen to the small details that made up our youngest daughter's world. But the most important change was that Lily stopped eating alone. She still loved the oak tree, and on warmer days we'd sometimes take our weekend lunches outside. But she no longer felt the need to escape from family meals. She no longer felt invisible at her own dinner table. One evening in mid-December, as we sat around our dining room table eating soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, Lily looked around at all of us and said, "I'm glad I belong here now." The simplicity of that statement, "I belong here now," hit me harder than any tears or dramatic declarations could have. "You always belonged here, sweetheart," I said softly. Lily considered this with the seriousness she brought to everything. "I know you love me." But loving someone and making them feel like they belong are different things. Out of the mouths of babes. She was right, of course. Love wasn't enough if it didn't translate into attention, inclusion, and genuine interest in who she was as a person. We had loved Lily deeply all along, but we hadn't made her feel like she mattered in the day-to-day rhythm of our family life. "You're absolutely right," I said. "And I'm sorry it took us so long to figure that out." Lily reached across the table and patted my hand with her small one. "It's okay, Mama. Sometimes grown-ups need more time to learn things than kids do." David laughed, but his eyes were suspiciously bright. "When did you get so wise, little one?" "I learned it from the tree," Lily said matter-of-factly. "Trees have to be patient because they live for a really long time." "They taught me that sometimes people need extra time to notice you." That night, after Lily was asleep, I found myself standing at our bedroom window, looking out at the oak tree in our backyard. It stood there in the darkness, its bare branches reaching toward the stars, as it had every night for the 30 years since it was planted. How many other families had it watched over the years? How many children had sat beneath its branches, feeling seen and heard by this silent sentinel when the people who were supposed to love them most had failed to notice? I made a mental note to plant flowers around the base of the tree in the spring. It deserved recognition for the role it had played in saving our family, because that's what it had done. Really. That old oak tree had given my daughter a place to retreat when home didn't feel like home. It had been her confidant when her family was too busy to listen. It had been her sanctuary when she needed to feel valued and seen. And in the end, it had taught us all a lesson about what it means to truly belong. 3 months later, on a warm Saturday in March, we had our first outdoor dinner of the new year. This time, it wasn't because anyone felt excluded or unheard. It was because we wanted to celebrate the tree that had taught us how to be a family. We hung string lights in its branches and set up a proper picnic table underneath. Lily insisted on making a toast to our tree, and we all raised our glasses of lemonade in salute to the oak that had been wiser than all of us combined. "To the tree that taught us how to listen," David said. "To the tree that kept Lily safe until we figured it out," Chloe added. "To the tree that's probably tired of hearing us talk," Tyler joked, making everyone laugh. And Lily, our wise little 7-year-old who had taught us all about patience and belonging, raised her glass highest of all, to the tree that helped my family find me. Now, 3 years later, as I sit here telling you this story, Lily is 10 years old. She's confident, talkative, and has never once eaten a meal alone under that oak tree again. Not because she's forbidden to, but because she doesn't need to anymore. But this isn't really a story about a happy ending, because real life doesn't work that way. It's a story about ongoing choices, daily decisions to see and hear each other, and the constant work it takes to maintain the connections that hold a family together. Let me tell you about last Tuesday, because it perfectly illustrates how far we've come and how vigilant we still need to be. Tyler is 18 now, a senior in high school with college applications consuming his every waking moment. Chloe is 16, driving herself to soccer practice and drama club rehearsals, her calendar packed with activities and social commitments. And Lily, at 10, is no longer the quiet little girl who disappeared into the background. She's discovering her own passions now: art, creative writing, and surprisingly, public speaking. Our girl, who once couldn't get a word in edgewise, now participates in her school's debate club and has opinions about everything, from environmental policy to social justice issues. Last Tuesday started like any typical evening. Tyler was stressed about his college essay deadlines. Chloe was worried about an upcoming chemistry test, and David was dealing with a difficult project at work. The dinner conversation was heading toward its old patterns. Everyone talking at once, multiple conversations happening simultaneously, the usual chaos of a busy family. Then Lily cleared her throat. "I need to tell you all something important," she said, her voice cutting through the noise with surprising authority. The table fell silent. Not because we were dismissing her, but because over the past 3 years, we'd learned that when Lily said something was important, it usually was. "My friend Sarah is moving away," she said, her eyes serious. "Her dad got a job in California, and they're leaving next month." Tyler, who might have brushed off this announcement 3 years ago, looked up from his phone. "That sucks, Lily." "Sarah's been your best friend since 2nd grade. How are you feeling about it?" Chloe asked, and I could hear genuine concern in her voice. Lily took a deep breath. "I'm really sad, but I'm also kind of excited for her because she's always wanted to see the ocean, and I'm worried that we won't stay friends once she moves so far away. Long-distance friendships are hard," David said thoughtfully, "but they're not impossible." Your mom and I have friends from college who live all over the country now." "Really?" Lily's eyes brightened slightly. "How do you stay close?" What followed was a 20-minute family discussion about friendship, distance, technology, and the different ways people can stay connected across miles and time zones. Tyler shared stories about friends who had moved away and how they'd maintained their relationships. Chloe talked about her friend who had moved to another state and how they video called every week. But more importantly, we all listened to Lily's fears and feelings about this major change in her young life. We validated her sadness while helping her think through ways to maintain the friendship. We acknowledged that this was genuinely difficult, while also helping her see the possibilities for growth and new experiences. "3 years ago, this conversation never would have happened. Lily's announcement about Sarah moving would have been met with distracted mm-hms, while Tyler dominated the conversation with college stress and Chloe chimed in with her own teenage dramas. Lily's feelings about losing her best friend would have been dismissed as kid problems that she'd get over quickly. But we've learned better. We've learned that a 10-year-old's friendship concerns deserve the same attention and respect as a teenager's academic stress or an adult's work problems. We've learned that pain is pain, regardless of the age of the person experiencing it. After dinner, Lily helped me clean up the kitchen while Tyler and Chloe went to do homework. "Thank you for listening tonight," she said, as she carefully dried a plate. "Of course, sweetheart. That's what families do." Lily smiled. And it wasn't always what our family did. She was right, and her honesty about our past struggles no longer stung the way it once did. Instead, it felt like an acknowledgement of how far we'd traveled together. "No, it wasn't," I agreed. "We had to learn how to do it better." "I'm glad you learned," Lily said simply. "I like feeling important." That night, as I tucked her into bed, Lily said something that made my heart both soar and ache. "Mama, do you think other kids eat dinner alone outside because their families are too loud?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "Because there's a girl in my class, Emma, and she always seems really quiet. Like she wants to say something but doesn't think anyone will listen. It reminds me of how I used to feel." I sat on the edge of her bed, struck by my daughter's empathy and emotional intelligence. "Well, what do you think might help Emma?" Maybe someone could ask her about her day and really listen to the answer. Maybe she just needs someone to make space for her to talk. The next day, Lily made it her mission to reach out to Emma. She invited her to sit with her group at lunch, asked her about her weekend, and made sure to include her in conversations during group work. Within a week, Emma was smiling more, participating in class discussions, and had even shared some of her own artwork with Lily. Watching my daughter use her own difficult experience to help another child was one of the proudest moments of my life. The little girl who had once eaten alone under a tree was now making sure no other child felt invisible. But perhaps the most remarkable change in our family has been in Tyler and Chloe. Tyler, who's now preparing to leave for college, has become incredibly protective of family dinner time. When friends call during meals, he lets them go to voicemail. When he's stressed about applications or deadlines, he makes a conscious effort not to monopolize the conversation. "Family dinner is sacred," he told his girlfriend when she suggested they go out to eat during one of his visits home. My family learned how to really talk to each other, and I don't want to mess with that. Chloe has developed into an amazing big sister. She regularly asks Lily about her day, remembers details about her friends and activities, and has even started a tradition of having sister movie nights, where Lily gets to pick the film and they make popcorn together. "I don't want Lily to ever feel like she did when she was 7, Chloe told me one evening as we watched Lily and her friends perform an impromptu dance routine in our living room. "She's too special to be invisible." David has perhaps changed the most of all. The man who once dismissed Lily's outdoor dinners as a phase now makes sure to spend one-on-one time with each of our children regularly. He takes Lily on daddy-daughter dates, where they go to art museums or bookstores, just the two of them. He's learned to ask follow-up questions and to really listen to the answers. "I almost missed out on knowing who she really is," he told me recently, as we watched Lily help our elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson with her garden. But she's this incredible, thoughtful, creative person, and I was so focused on Tyler's games and Chloe's grades that I nearly missed it all. But the most important change is that our family has learned the difference between being together and being connected. We used to think that sitting around the same table constituted family time. We've learned that true family time requires intention, attention, and the willingness to see each person as an individual worthy of interest and respect. We still have loud dinners sometimes. Tyler still gets excited about basketball. Chloe still passionately discusses her latest projects, and David and I still share the ups and downs of adult life. But now we also have quiet moments, thoughtful pauses, and spaces for everyone to be heard. Lily still loves the oak tree in our backyard, but now it's for different reasons. Instead of eating alone under its branches, she reads books there on sunny afternoons. She's built a small fairy garden around its base with flowers and tiny decorative houses. Sometimes she takes her art supplies outside and draws pictures of the birds that nest in its branches. Last summer, we had a tree service come to trim some of the dead branches and check on its overall health. The arborist told us that our oak was probably about 40 years old and could easily live another 60 years or more. "This tree will probably outlive all of us," I told Lily, as we watched the workers carefully tend to its branches. "Good," she said firmly. "Maybe it can help other families the way it helped ours." I think about that conversation often. How many other families are struggling with connection without even realizing it? How many children are eating metaphorical meals alone under metaphorical trees, because the people who love them most are too busy or too distracted to really see them? The warning signs aren't always as obvious as a child literally eating dinner outside. Sometimes it's a teenager who stops trying to share their problems because they've learned that parents are too stressed to really listen. Sometimes it's a spouse who gradually stops talking about their day because their partner is always scrolling through their phone during conversations. Sometimes it's the quiet kid in the corner of the classroom who has given up on raising their hand because they've learned that the louder voices always get heard first. I've become something of an evangelist for family dinner time since our experience with Lily. Not the Pinterest perfect and home-cooked meal kind of family dinner, just the simple act of sitting together and really paying attention to each other. When friends complain about their teenagers being withdrawn or their children seeming distant, I always ask the same question. When was the last time you had an uninterrupted conversation with them? The answers are usually telling. Well, we talk in the car on the way to practice. We catch up while I'm making breakfast. We chat while they're doing homework. All of these interactions happen during multitasking moments when real attention is divided. They're better than nothing, but they're not the same as sitting down together with the specific intention of connecting. I'm not saying that family dinners are a magic cure for all relationship problems. But I am saying that the simple act of regularly giving each family member your full attention can prevent a lot of problems from developing in the first place. Last month, Lily's class had to write essays about someone who had influenced their life. I expected her to write about a teacher, or maybe her grandmother, or even a famous person she admired. Instead, she wrote about the oak tree in our backyard. Her essay was titled, "The Tree That Taught My Family How to Listen," and in it, she described those months when she ate dinner alone outside, and how it eventually led to our family learning how to really hear each other. "The tree didn't judge me for being quiet," she wrote. "It didn't tell me my problems were too small to matter. It just stood there and listened while I figured out how to use my voice." And when my family finally learned how to listen too, the tree taught them the same patience it had always shown me. Her teacher called me after reading the essay, concerned that Lily had been neglected or emotionally abandoned. I assured her that while we had made mistakes, we had worked hard to correct them and that Lily was thriving now. "She's a remarkable child," the teacher said. Her empathy and emotional intelligence are beyond her years. I think that's true, but I also think Lily learned those qualities the hard way. She learned empathy because she knew what it felt like to be unseen. She learned emotional intelligence because she had to figure out how to navigate a family system that wasn't working for her. Those are valuable skills, but I wish she hadn't had to develop them through pain. Today, as I finish writing this story, I can see Lily through the kitchen window. She's sitting under the oak tree, but not alone. She's with Emma, the quiet girl from her class who has become one of her closest friends. They're working on some kind of art project together, their heads bent over papers and colored pencils, chattering away about whatever 10-year-old girls discuss when they feel safe and heard. And I think about all the children who are eating dinner alone, literally or figuratively, waiting for their families to notice them. I think about all the parents who love their children deeply, but haven't learned how to translate that love into daily attention and connection. I think about all the oak trees, literal and metaphorical, that are silently providing comfort to children who need someone, anyone, to bear witness to their existence. If you're reading this story and recognizing yourself in it, please know that it's never too late to change. Lily was 7 when we finally noticed what was happening, but she could have been 17 or 27. The human need to be seen and heard doesn't diminish with age. Start small. Put down your phone during conversations. Ask follow-up questions. Make space for the quiet voices in your family. Listen to the stories that seem unimportant to you, but matter deeply to the person telling them. And if you have a child who has found their own version of eating alone under a tree, don't try to drag them back to the table. Go sit with them under their tree. Learn what they've been trying to tell you. Let them teach you how to see the world through their eyes. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply bearing witness to their experience. Sometimes love isn't enough. We also have to learn how to pay attention. The oak tree in our backyard is still there, still standing sentinel over our family. Its branches are fuller now, its trunk a little thicker. In the spring, it blooms with new life. In the summer, it provides shade for children's games. In the fall, its leaves turn gold and orange, before drifting down to create a carpet for jumping and playing. In the winter, when its branches are bare, you can see all the way through it to the sky beyond. But even then, especially then, it's beautiful. There's something profound about a tree that can stand bare and vulnerable and still remain rooted, still reach toward the light. I think that's what our family learned how to do, how to be vulnerable with each other, how to remain rooted in love while still reaching toward growth and understanding. Lily still talks to the tree sometimes, but now she also talks to us. And we've learned how to listen with the same patience and acceptance that old oak showed her when she needed it most. That's the real ending to this story. Not that everything became perfect, but that we learned how to keep trying, keep listening, keep making space for each other in the daily chaos of family life. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings, we still eat dinner outside under the branches of the tree that saved our family. Not because anyone feels excluded, but because we want to remember. We want to honor the teacher that stood in our backyard all along, waiting for us to learn the lessons it had to offer about patience, attention, and the profound importance of making space for every voice to be heard. After all, families, like trees, grow stronger when all their parts are nourished and supported. And sometimes it takes a wise old oak to remind us what we should have known all along, that everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and valued, especially by the people who love them most.